I'm Kirsten Peachey. I think I've met most people, but not everybody. I'm the Director of Congregational Health Partnerships for Advocate Healthcare. Advocate is a large faith-based healthcare provider in Chicago with, I don't know how many hospitals we have now. How many? 11, 12. But we're faith-based, so we're affiliated with the United Church of Christ and the Lutheran Church. And so my work in congregational health, I see, is really kind of continuing the legacy of our founders over 100 years ago, which were people of faith in congregations that started this big, what's now one of the largest healthcare providers in Illinois. Also, one of the main things that I work on through congregational health partnerships is something called the Center for Faith and Community Health Transformation, which is a joint project of Advocate and the Office for Community Engagement and Neighborhood Health Partnerships at UIC here. And we together work on mobilizing faith communities around social conditions that impact people's health. So those root causes that we've been talking about. And Dr. Fleming, Reverend Dr. Fleming is my co-director, our co-director. Okay, so today, one of the things that we talk a lot about at the center are these two ideas of moral imagination and spirit power. And so I do have slides and I do have stuff to present, but really a lot of what I'm going to say we've really already talked about through the conversations that we've had this morning. So because of I'm going to use the mic because of the sound. I think it makes it easier, and I'd really love it if people have a comment, if you could come and take the mic, just to make sure that we can all hear each other, and then also it goes on to the recording, which I think is really important for our voices to be captured. So these ideas of spirit power and moral imagination are terms that we use, ways of thinking that we use to try to get at what it takes to create social transformation. We think that to get to the kind of the transformation that we're talking about, the community transformation that we're talking about, the health and well-being that comes out of transformation, that's not something that can happen without these two things. So what do we mean by moral imagination? And this comes from the work of a guy named John Paul Lederach, L-E-D-E-R-A-C-H, and I'll have his information at the end, who does peace-building work around the world in very difficult settings. And so he has this idea of moral imagination, which he's clear is not only his idea, but it's language that he uses. And so his idea is that moral imagination is the capacity to imagine something rooted in the challenges of the real world. All right? Yet capable of giving birth to that which does not yet exist. So we're rooted in the realities of the real world, but we have the capacity to see something that doesn't yet exist. That's the idea behind moral imagination. And maybe you have another word for it. So be thinking about, from my tradition, from my culture, from my language, what's the word that we use for this? What's it? Faith. So when we talk about moral, we're not talking about moral in the way we sometimes think about it as, regulations about how we behave. It's not a religious dogma. It's not rules. It's not ethics about what is proper and right. It's not about religious questions really at all. It's really about how do we relate to each other as people. That's what's meant by moral in this situation, in this context. And then the imagination part is first the ability to see what's there already. So when Tasmika was talking, you heard moral imagination in her, right? She acted and created something out of a moral imagination, but it started by seeing how things already were. She was able to see the people who were so close by, that were so different and so separate from her. And if she hadn't actually taken the time and made the commitment to see it, her moral imagination would not have been engaged. Imagination is the key to acts by which new things happen or by which old things are restored, by which our ways are transformed. So it's a way of acting into a new way of being, a new way of creating. And it's transcendent. It really is reaching for something that's beyond where we are. That's something that we haven't quite seen, but that we know is there. Okay, and so these are the things I think we've already covered in our conversation. That moral imagination comes, or rises, or is built, or is developed when we can see ourselves in a relationship with other people, when we can imagine ourselves as being people that are part of a web of relationships. And this is language I'm sure you're very familiar with, but something that we have to remind ourselves about over and over again, that we're not really individuals by ourselves, but we are in relationship with other people. And that one of the questions, I know you all didn't do the questions that Hema had for you, but one of the questions was, what does this interfaith work invite in and from you? And so that's part of that capacity to imagine ourselves in relationship. How are we called in? What is called in and from us when we imagine ourselves in that kind of relationship? The willingness to embrace complexity. So for all of us working in community settings and working with other people, we know that we are all socially complex people, and we know that our communities are socially complex. And so we have to really be comfortable with complexity. And part of that, Hema did a great example of this, part of that complexity is being able to say, maybe two things are true. It's important to take your shoes off, and it's important to keep your shoes on. And finding a greater truth that unites those, or that is underneath those things. So that's part of complexity, is being able to hold multiple things that are true and seemingly contradictory, and finding out what's the deeper truth there. So when we engage in our work in communities, when we engage in our work on our teams, be thinking about how is this complexity part of what gives us imagination? How is this complexity part of where the power of our moral imagination comes? How do we build our own capacity as leaders to handle complexity? Belief in and creating space for the creative act. The youth minister got kicked out of the church because there wasn't space for the creative act. It can be dangerous, it can be uncomfortable to actually create the space, to make the space for creativity. And many of our organizations are not set up for that kind of creativity. The public health departments really are not set up for that kind of outside of the box thinking, and really a lot of religious organizations are not either. That's not what our first impulse is toward. And so again, in our teams, how do we create space to be creative, for that creative act to emerge? So be thinking about that as you're doing your work as a team. And moral imagination also requires risk. It requires stepping out into something new, stepping out into something we've never seen before. A couple of years ago, we had a wonderful conference that was all built around this idea of risk, using an example of jazz playing as an example of a way to risk. So if anybody knows anything about jazz, and I know very little, when you have a jazz group that's playing, or maybe this is with other kinds of music too, where there's improvisation. Improvisation is risking. You're risking entering into doing something you've never done before, and you're counting on the other people that are playing music to support you, and to go along with you, and to provide harmony for you, and to provide the rhythm. And so it's a really rich way of thinking about what it means to risk, both individually but also corporately. Any thoughts about moral imagination? from our conversation today or from your own work, something that's stirring around in you, an example that you have of how you've seen moral imagination at work? Yeah, Jackie, you gotta get the mic.
I guess I also think when you think in moral imagination, you're also talking about being accepting and open to the Spirit and allowing Him to move you in whatever direction that may be. Because I think many times, when we go to school, we have decided, well, I'm going to be an engineer, and that's what we focus on, but you just never know where He may take you. So part of you allowing Him to move you also may mean that it's taking you from something completely different than what you may have imagined. But the end result is that we will be fulfilling His purpose, and we're also being obedient and also sharing and helping those that are maybe in need of whatever it is you have to offer.
And part of what I like about that is that that's the faith. That's the faith that you're being held within something, within the grace of God, within, however you call it, within the love of God, within God's Spirit, that allows you to risk because you know that you're not alone. What else? Any other thoughts about this?
It strikes me that you could also call it sort of a relational imagination. That spirit of creativity that comes as we are in relationship with others.
Yeah, so Tasmita's whole enterprise came about because she was in relationship. And it came out of her vision, came out of her relationship with these women and the stories they were telling her and the friendship that she developed with them. So that the power of relationship is really critical, really foundational. Anything else? Do you feel your own moral imagination? Yeah. All right, so then there's this idea of spirit power. So moral imagination, foundational to the kind of transformation that we're talking about. And spirit power is the other thing that we talk about. And this term, spirit power, came to us from one of our colleagues, Reverend Jim Ben, who died a few years ago of pancreatic cancer. But he was a lifelong, all his adult life, a lifelong community organizer. He organized back in the steel mills in Pittsburgh and was a leader in the community organizing movement here in Chicago, and a person who is passionate about community transformation. And he grew up in the Saul Alinsky model of community organizing. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But just to talk a little bit more about spirit power, Jim Wallace, who some may know is a writer and a publisher of a magazine called Sojourners Magazine, progressive Christian thought leader. He has a book called The Great Awakening, where he talks about this idea of that there are two hungers in our society, the hunger for social justice and the hunger for spirituality. And the thing that relates to the spirit power is that the first hunger, which is for spirituality, is the one that will energize and empower the second. So that's the basic idea of spirit power, is that we really want to create social justice, we really want to create change. It's rooted in this first hunger that we have, this yearning that we have for spirituality, which is, I think, very closely connected to that hunger for relationship as well, as we were talking about, Robert. Okay, so going on to Jim Ben. So he comes out of this community organizing method that says that strategically, you only take on organizing campaigns that you can win. If you don't think you can win it, you don't take it on. And then the second one is that you use the two main tools that you use for these campaigns are money power and people power. So mobilizing people, having your base, mobilizing your base, and then leveraging resources to support the movement. And Jim, from a faith perspective, said those two things are fine. Those are great resources. We need those. But taking on campaigns you can't win means that Moses never would have gone out of Egypt. That Dr. King would never have, organized for racial justice, for civil rights. That Rosa Parks should never have sat down on that bus. Spirit power is what tells us, Tasmi has said it, we have to believe it can be done. We have to believe that it is possible. It is possible if we believe it. And so that rather than limiting ourselves strategically as people of faith, we have the ability to see beyond and to claim a power that's there, to take on something that seems impossible, that which seems impossible. In addition to the money power and the people power, we have that spirit power that says we can do something that seems impossible. So again, Jim Walls, the social mission of the church, it could be the mosque, it could be the temple, synagogue, whatever, will never be accomplished without the fire and passion that comes from personal faith. So cultivating our own spirit, personally, collectively, again, think about your projects and think about how do we and our team, for the goals that we're trying to meet, how do we cultivate a sense of spirit power? What seems impossible that we might stop and say, well, we're really not going to accomplish that. We'll just do this. Is there a way that you can reach beyond what seems possible to do something that's impossible? And is there a way that you nurture your own spiritual life, both as an individual, as a team, on behalf of the community that you're working with, in order to create this spirit power, to work out of spirit power? I want to show you a video of a group in Brazil. They're called the ELOS Institute, E-L-O-S Institute. And they have this program called Warriors Without Weapons. Is anybody familiar with this group? So what they do is they bring people together from around the world, and they train. They go into training for a month. They're in training, and it's a spiritual development training. They each week they work on a different kind of spiritual truth that they learn about and they kind of learn about within themselves. And then they go into communities. After they, sort of as part of that spiritual discipline that they're practicing, they go into a community. And while they're in this community, they are looking to do a project that will revitalize some aspect of that community's life. And usually it has to do with a public space. And so the first thing they do is they go in the community and they train their gaze to see beauty. So they train their gaze. It's not just you go and look at them. You actually have to really train your ability to see and look for beauty. And so maybe they'll see, when they go in the community, they'll see someone has some flowers planted in front of their house. That's beauty. Or maybe someone wears really beautiful clothing. Or maybe someone has some decoration on their home or something like this. So, and these are communities like the one in Bangladesh that Tasmiha was talking about, where there's seemingly, from our perspective, nothing. Okay? So see beauty. And then the next step is to find the story behind that beauty. So for the person that plants those flowers there, tell me about that. Why do you do that? What does this mean to you? What do you see when you look at that? For the person who maybe wears the beautiful clothing, did you make that? You made it? How did you do that? Blah, blah, whatever. You find the story behind what is beautiful there. And then the next thing is to ask about the dream. So this can be, this can be tricky, because sometimes you think people who are, struggling won't have a dream. Maybe they themselves have never dared to dream. And you don't have to go across the ocean, again, as Shirley has pointed out. This is true in all of our communities. To ask people, what do you dream of? What do you dream for yourself? What do you dream for your community? And then to actually begin to build that dream on a small scale. They usually do their projects around public space, but to actually begin to imagine and put together models of, well, what would it look like if we actually did that dream? And to get everybody's dreams modeled, and then to start to bring all of those models together and say, oh yeah, we all have that aspect, let's keep that. Oh yeah, we really like this part in this person's model, let's pull that in. So to build the dream, to actually begin to do it. And then to embrace the miracle. To just celebrate and revel in the miracle of what happens when people come together. So I have an example to show you on this video.
Escutar o lugar, ele está oferecendo lugares para a gente fazer biblioteca, lugar para fazer uma praça, que a gente pode fazer ciranda, lugar para fazer a horta, que tem bastante sol. Então acho que a magia vai ser a mistura assim, do que o lugar está pedindo, do que o nosso coração está querendo oferecer para a comunidade e do que a comunidade sonhou. Agora é a gente botar essa energia, essa magia em ação, assim, botar o coração para agir.
Que é onde acontece a parte assim mais trash, assim,
aqui é uma
mais...
descida ao inferno.
É, exatamente. Aqui é bem forte, a gente vai ver lá dentro. Tem comércio de drogas, onde tem o uso, né? Até tem várias pessoas que já se mataram aqui dentro.
E assim, a gente está querendo fazer um centro cultural aqui, porque nós não temos lazer, não temos nada.
Vamos conseguir mudar esse lugar?
Ah, por supuesto. ¿Tú lo dudas? ¿Eh?
Hoje a ideia deles é limpar definitivamente esse lugar que era um símbolo de lixo, de degradação humana e ambiental, e deixar o lugar limpo para começar a colocar os outros sonhos aqui dentro. Esse lugar para a gente é um símbolo, né, de como a gente lida numa situação de catástrofe, onde tudo está destruído, as relações estão destruídas, a degradação não é só física, mas é humana também. E começa com você, restaurar você mesmo, restaurar os elos, as relações nossas com outras pessoas que compõem nossa comunidade, num sentido mais amplo. E por último, restaurar espaços mesmo que vão ser o palco para essas relações acontecerem. Para essas relações serem realmente saudáveis, a gente precisa de espaços saudáveis também.
Vocês estão fazendo com essa terra?
Colocar no jardim. Colocar no jardim. O jardim das crianças.
As crianças também estão participando. Eles estão arquitetando, eles estão sonhando e ao mesmo tempo que eles estão sonhando, eles estão realizando. Então a gente está mais ouvindo a voz deles, o que eles querem, como eles querem, do que a gente mesmo impor as nossas ideias.
No começo foi difícil, mas depois convivência, assim, dia a dia que a gente foi fazendo atividade, o pessoal foi abrindo e a pessoa foi mostrando que são uns guerreiros, não guerreiro de alma, mas guerreiro de coração.
Aqui tem uma união forte, né? Um ajuda o outro. Com pouco dinheiro, eles estão fazendo milagres.
So my commitment is about continuing to look for the points of light, and I think that's what we did, and Edgar and Rodrigo have really encouraged us in this experience to look amidst all of this garbage, to look for those points of light and then to make space to expand those points of light. So that's my commitment to myself.
volver, votar para aquí algún día y encontrarme con esto, sobre todo lleno de verde, lleno de plantas, lleno de aire, lleno de niños jugando en las plantas, en los árboles. Creo que es lo que más se necesita.
I will say it totally changed my life.
Eu sinto que o maior milagre já está acontecendo, a gente não está vendo.
Que a gente acreditou nessa proposta e foi chegando gente, assim, foi chegando de tom totalmente diferente, né? Começou assim, a chegar grupo de estudantes que viu na televisão, hoje chegou a liderança do setor comercial daqui da região do Paquetá, 4 redes de televisão estavam aqui, começou a nascer, assim, acho que isso para mim está sendo um balanço, o que eu vejo no final é um saldo bem positivo.
Que nem a gente já se habituou com o pessoal, né? É uma coisa assim, como é que eu posso te explicar? É porque eles trouxeram, assim, para muitas de nós, uma reciclagem, sabe? Uma reciclagem por dentro. Porque a gente, quase ninguém aqui tem o hábito de ver coisas boas assim acontecer, né? Então a gente vê gente de fora, que não tem nada a ver com o nosso sofrimento, que não vai nem usufruir, veio e ajudou a gente. A gente vê todo mundo unido e eles foram ensinando a união. Apesar que nós mesmos que trabalhamos aqui, que lutamos, né, a gente vai lutar até o fim agora para não destruir. E se Deus quiser, cada vez trazendo mais pessoas, né, que existem outras coisas que gostaríamos que mudassem. Esse daqui é, como eu poderia dizer para você, é o chamariz para os outros projetos que a gente tem e às vezes a população não acredita. E aqui a gente está mostrando que de fato acontece, né? Então é outro presente que ganhamos, né? Um dentro do outro, assim, né? Só uma questão de descobrir.
What from here struck you? What resonated? What got you excited? What felt real?
That even though things look very grim, dark, she said look for the points of light. And, you know, I think about myself personally, typically when I'm about to approach something that I'm fearing, I'm always looking at the dark side of it, or what's not, or what could possibly be happening. But it just kind of was one of those things that if I start to look at the points of light, then that's my energy to move forward. Because at the end of it, even though I don't know what's going to happen, there's that possibility of success.
Yeah, and that's part of that spiritual discipline of training our gaze. Because like you said, Jackie, we're not really used to looking in that way. It's a different way of looking, and so that's part of that spiritual discipline. What else?
That people from the surrounding community just started showing up, just kind of out of nowhere, unprovoked.
Yeah, there was something happening, something real and relational that was happening that people wanted to be part of. And it's interesting because then the town manager comes and he wants to know what's going on here.
One of the things that one of the last ladies says that really resonated with me as we, you know, in our community work with trying to make things better. She articulated what many people don't say out loud. She said that we're not used to seeing anything good happening here. And so it's like that, and then I had to get that quote because she said that they had awakened a revolution in us that was already here. So we have to address that hopelessness, even though they don't say it with their mouths, but that hopelessness is there.
This reminds me of mental health recovery work, how training people to be companions and building that relational component into the recovery process can be miraculous. It can be internally transforming for both the person with the mental illness and the person who's companioning them. And I like the use of the word miracle there. Yeah. There is a kind of miracle.
going to end up on the floor. What else? What else?
I think what touched me is that sometimes we tend to feel like, what can one person do? But realizing after seeing all this and hearing the lecture earlier today, is realizing that it does just take one person to open up that door and allowing other people to kind of create the change within themselves.
Okay. So for me, when I looked at this video and I've seen it before, I could just see the scriptures living. So my sacred scripture is the Bible. And so the promise of God's presence, I could see in this video. Also, this promise of supplying what we need. If we look hard enough, we can find that it's going on somewhere. And so for me, it's like living, seeing the scriptures live.
I feel the same. What the scripture that came to me was the valley of dry bones, and asking the question, can these bones live? And if you believe they can, then they will, and that's what we saw.
So I don't want to lose the lesson from this, which is that people didn't just come in and do this. So this was part of a whole month-long process of spiritual practice, where they were actually doing the work as part of developing their own spiritual life. So I think that's really important for us if we're going to be doing transformational work, that not to think, we just go in and do it, but in fact that it has to be rooted in the spiritual, nurturing the spirit power, and that moral imagination also comes out of that spiritual work that we have to do. I was stunned when I found out that they only spent 15 minutes a day actually working. So much in this video shows them working, but all day long, all they were doing was working on the spiritual aspect of it. And they only spent 15 minutes a day working, which for us as Westerners is, we would be having seizures, why are we not in there doing it? But it was part of the spiritual work to say, we will do, this is so beyond what we can actually address. We will do what we can, and we will be very intentional about only working in a limited way, because, and that's part of the spiritual learning that was happening. So that doesn't come through here, but I cannot get my head around that. So that for us is a very important lesson about trust, I think. The other thing, we'll get a comment.
I have a question. When you talk about spiritual learning and spiritual work, can you be more specific about what that is?
Yes, okay, so what they did in this case, this could look different according to different traditions, but they had a shaman, and so each week they focused on a different element. So 1 week was water, 1 week was earth, 1 week was fire, 1 week was air. And again, just thinking about what are the spiritual truths that sort of run through all of our traditions. All of our traditions, there would be something that would, that would be addressed by looking at that element. So water, I forget exactly what water meant, but it meant life or renewal or something like that. And they would do exercises that would help them to kind of get into that spiritual reality or that spiritual truth. Group exercises, individual exercises that they would do. They showed it very briefly, but you saw people gathered in a circle in the building, and then you saw the circle on the floor. So part of what they were doing is sort of casting out demons. They were saying, you heard the woman say, this is a powerful place. So they were recognizing the power of the evil that was in that room, and they were cleansing it. So that was part of the spiritual practice that they did. So the other thing that I think is also important that wasn't addressed here is they had a couple of rules. One was that whatever they created, they had to create with what was there. No one could donate money and take money for it.
I saw that walkway that they used with bricks that were strewn.
Right, so they created something new out of bricks that had been, just junk before. So that's one thing. And so here, where our first impulse is always, well, we can't do anything unless we have the resources. They cut our funding. We're dead in the water. What they're saying is that is an illusion, and we have to actually reject it to claim the power that's there already. So, no money. You have to use what's there. I'm forgetting a big one, but another one was, it has to be beautiful. It has to be excellent. You can't do something half-half. Whatever you do, it has to be excellent. And then I think the other one was play. You have to play. So anyway, I mean, it's just rich. And if you go to walk out,
It's on there.
Oh, it's
right on the screen.
Right. So the Walk Out, Walk On is a book that captures this story, but also stories from around the world about how people are doing this kind of work. And then you can find this video on walkoutwalkon.org, along with many, many other videos, other videos that also capture some of these kinds of things, activities that are happening around the world, but also in this country. Any final thought, final question before Angela?
So can I go back and tell my boss I don't work 15 minutes a day and I'm on work?
As long as it's part of your spiritual practicing.
Exactly.
Tell her that too. Tell her. All right.
Sorry, I said, so, because you know more of the background story, like, did they encounter, besides, spiritual tensions that were at work, did they encounter any other barriers to their progress, any other?
I think there were, like when the town manager came, I think there were some like, oh, what's going on here, kind of things like that. I'm not sure about like how much, how many barriers there were or whatever kind of dynamics there were. But so they've done this in Brazil, India, all around the world. They've done these kinds of exercises in the community that bring people together in that way.